In the late 1990s, two sisters emerged from out of nowhere to take the tennis world by storm.
When these two girls came along with so much confidence, so much of a belief, who are black, they did not come from a tennis background, people could sense that tennis was changing.
The Williams sisters were a phenomenon, and by the turn of the millennium, younger sibling Serena eclipsed her older sister Venus and began to leave her rivals in the dust.
When Serena Williams, when she was on her front foot, in your face, you had no chance.
She was different. She was powerful. She was really aggressive. She mowed through the best players at the time.
2002 is really when Serena goes solo. She's playing so amazingly and so far ahead of everybody else that it is hard to ever really keep her in conversation as the Williams sisters. She's now just Serena Williams, or even just Serena.
And where Serena's talent was reinvigorating tennis, her striking appearance both on and off the court sent shockwaves through popular culture.
She's Serena Williams. She is more than an athlete. She can design clothes for Fashion Week. She can wear what she wants to wear and inspire other people.
Serena was telling people you can be strong and feminine. You can be beautiful, but you're still out there to kick butt. She had become like her own celebrity outside of sports, and people knew her name everywhere.
Having overcome antagonism both within the tennis establishment and across the wider media, after a period of decline, Serena returned stronger than ever.
It's Serena against the world. As she ages, it's gonna keep getting better. That decade-long period of her cranking out these titles is unprecedented.
This is the story of Serena Williams' remarkable journey from a Compton prodigy to a global icon.
I think she's the greatest athlete of all time in all sports. What she's done in the ripple and the cascade, this is what dreams are made of. You cannot make this stuff up.
September 2022. Fans arrive in Flushing Meadows, New York, for the US Open Tennis Championships. And this year, there is a bittersweet mood, as crowds will witness the end of a remarkable era. Having revealed in a Vogue magazine interview that she's stepping away from the sport, Serena Williams, often credited as the greatest player of all time, is entering her final tournament. 40 years old and ranked 605th in the world, she has made a surprise return from an injury that looks set to end her career. But Serena is retiring on her own terms.
Serena Williams' final US Open appearance, coming on as it did the heels of this announcement in Vogue that she was sort of evolving away from the game of tennis, I think gave everybody in the sport a real moment to kind of grapple with the enormity of her legacy. Being in the stadium as she played those last couple matches and had those last couple victories was a real gift.
The mood is both celebratory and downbeat. Tennis fans lament the end of a monumental career, but also acknowledge the full impact of Serena's historic accomplishments, both on and off the court.
She is not only the embodiment and the actual demonstration of the American dream, but she is inspiring to all those who aspire to something like that.
She's a legend, you know, as far as sports goes, not only as just an athlete, but a female, and then on top of that, a black female as well. Someone that has been impacted heavily by black females as far as my mothers and aunts, and now I have daughters. I just thought it was important to witness and be a part of history.
Having emerged as a distinct outsider at the close of the 20th century, she has helped to transform both tennis and popular culture itself in the 21st.
Everything she did and everything she accomplished kind of set the tennis world up to keep wanting to strive for more.
Serena did more to change women's tennis than anyone else. The young players who are emerging today are part of that legacy, because many of them will tell you they're only playing tennis because they saw Serena Williams.
She's brought this wave of people into tennis. And by people, I don't necessarily mean women or people of color, although yes, but just made it so much more in conversation with a larger culture. Tennis had gotten very stale and corporate and white and male. And what Serena kind of brought to tennis, especially as the late 90s turned into the 2000s and the 2010s, and she really kind of hit her peak where she's going for the Serena Slam, which is a number of slams in a row, getting gold medals, appearing on fashion covers, going down runways, learning different languages. You know, she just became so enormous as a cultural force. She kind of reignited the imaginations of what tennis could be.
But her journey to become such a towering cultural figure was not without its obstacles. Her struggle to be recognized as one of the greatest American athletes of all time, a testament to her tenacity and her endurance. And few could have foreseen how revelatory she would become when her story in the public eye first began almost 30 years beforehand. Los Angeles, 1994. The word is out on the West Coast tennis circuit that a prodigiously talented young black player has emerged, making waves in the lower levels of the game. Her name is Venus Williams.
I kept hearing about Venus Williams. I live in Los Angeles, they're from Los Angeles. You know, it was kind of a rumor or someone was talked about. And there was a tournament in San Francisco that Venus played in, an indoor tournament, and was a huge sensation. Everything about her was different and interesting. She was just very, very good.
When Venus made her debut in 1994, that's what really got me interested in tennis. I covered some US Opens, but I was not emotionally invested in this sport. There was no one who really captured my imagination until I saw the 14-year-old Venus. That was because of her talent and because of her father, Richard Williams, basically saying, my daughter is going to be the best player in the world, and people thought he was nuts.
The outlandish claims of Venus's father and coach, Richard Williams, helped to quickly push his daughter into the media spotlight. But it soon emerged that Venus wasn't the whole story, as Richard also announced that she had a younger sibling, Serena, who he believed would eventually eclipse her older sister.
The Serena drumbeat came from Richard Williams, who said, I have this great daughter, Venus. She's fabulous. You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till you see the second one.
I got to interview Richard Williams. He said, Serena's gonna be even better. I said, why? 2 reasons. He said, Serena understands angles better, and the second thing is, she's meaner.
Serena probably be a better player than Venus. That's not to compare my girls, but she will be. And her main strength, Serena, she's just like a pet bull. She just wants you, she want to tie in on you. She wants you real bad. And if you get a player that enjoys the battle like she does, that's what you're looking for. She has every quality that you would see in Mr. Jimmy Connors, someone who just really want to do it. And that's Serena's strength.
He talked about her, and he was like an old-time huckster. He was like, step right up, I got a great kid coming up. And it was really, you wanted to roll your eyes because he was a bit of a bombastic person. But no one had seen her at a tournament. But when she busted out, she busted out.
And that eventually happened in Chicago for the 1997 Ameritech Cup. Only 16 years old and ranked 304th in the world, Serena Williams beat world number 7 Mary Pierce and number 4 Monica Seles, and the whole tennis world suddenly stood up and took notice.
It was an announcement if there ever needed to be, and you have the capacity, the way the sport is run, you have the capacity to just zoom up the rankings, especially when you beat really high-ranked players. So that didn't last long. That whole idea of, oh, she's only seeded or ranked 300th in the world. Ha ha. I can assure you no one took her lightly after that. No one.
But as the talent of both Williams sisters became clear, they were not welcomed with open arms by the tennis establishment. Their sudden appearance on the professional circuit was a challenge to the conventions of the sport.
What really, to me, is so notable about Venus and Serena is that they didn't come up through the USTA. The United States Tennis Association, which is our governing body here in the US, it's the largest of them all. It was sort of conventional wisdom that the USTA would be the pathway to becoming a professional tennis player. It cannot be overstated the fact that Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena, did not allow his daughters to play any of the USTA tournaments at all.
Basically, they were being prepped and prepared for the professional game. So they were leapfrogging over the junior tennis circuit and all that entails. This is where you learn the tennis etiquette, so-called etiquette. This is where you make friends. This is where promoters get to see you. So the discussion was less about these very talented young players and aren't we excited about seeing them and isn't it interesting? And it was more about who the hell are they to not take the path that you're supposed to take.
That actually was sort of the revolutionary and amazing thing about all of them is they completely bucked the system. And so I think for that reason, it made their appearance on the scene in like the late 90s when they're playing and winning against established tour professionals that much more controversial and that much more exciting because nobody had really gotten a look at them.
Yet in the conservative world of tennis, everything about the Williams sisters was unconventional. Their father, Richard Williams, a security guard attracted to get-rich-quick schemes, was not a tennis player himself. Yet a chance viewing of a 1978 Grand Slam final led him to look at the sport as a potential business opportunity. And although his partner, Oracene, already had 3 children from a previous marriage, Richard saw this as a plan for the future.
He was watching TV on a Sunday afternoon. He just happened to see a tennis tournament that was won by a Romanian player named Virginia Ruzic, and she got a $40,000 check. He said, wait a minute, she only had to play a week? She won this tournament, she got $40,000? Basketball was not an option. There were great female basketball players who couldn't make a living. Golf, there was a women's professional golf league, but they didn't have the big purses. So Richard was astute enough to look at the sports landscape and say, tennis is the sport.
He started planning before they were born. He told Oracene that he was gonna have these champions. He wrote a 75-page business plan. He even had some of Oracene's older daughters playing tennis, but it wasn't until he had Venus and Serena, it was like this plan that he had for them before they were born, before she was even carrying them.
Initially raised in Long Beach, California, in 1983, when Venus and Serena were still toddlers, Richard moved the family to Compton, just south of Los Angeles. And this was also part of the plan, although the public courts where he would train his daughters were far removed from the upper-crust country clubs of the established tennis world.
Compton is a rough neighborhood in Southern California.
It had been an affluent white community, then it became an affluent black community, and then there was crime. And then with gangster rap, with NWA, some of those groups, they kind of made the reputation that, oh, everything's about gang culture, gangster rap. And that's the kind of reputation it had when Venus and Serena were young.
Richard thought that it would toughen up Venus and Serena if they lived in an area where you basically have to hold on to everything. No one's gonna give you anything, and you have to really fight for everything you get. And if you can emerge from an area like Compton, you'll be mentally tougher than these other players you're gonna compete against. So it was Richard's idea that Compton would toughen them up.
And for 6 years, Richard dedicated himself to coaching his daughters on the rundown courts of Compton. But knowing he could only take them so far, in 1990, he contacted Florida-based tennis coach Rick Macy and invited him to California to assess Serena and Venus's potential and consider taking them under his wing.
I'm checking them out technically, arms, legs, hair, beads flying off their head, and right then and there I'm going, what in God's name am I doing in Compton, California on a Saturday? They weren't any better, any worse than stuff I see all the time at my camp for that age. So then I said, let's play competitive points. The whole landscape changed. When I said game on, I never saw 2 little girls try so hard in my life. There was a rage. There was a rage inside both these girls I never saw. That was just insane. Right then and there, I went up to Richard. After I saw this, I said, Richard, come here. You got the next female Michael Jordan on your hands. He puts his arm around me and he goes, no, brother man, I got the next 2.
In the summer of 1991, the Williams family bid farewell to the streets of Compton and headed for the beatific coastal city of Delray Beach, Florida, to train with Rick Macy. Having previously coached teen sensation Jennifer Capriati, who had turned pro at 13 years old and later became world #1, at his elite tennis academy, Macy now turned his attention to transforming Serena and Venus into champions.
I was there for one reason. For Venus and Serena, I was on a mission. It wasn't about Richard, it wasn't about Rick Macy. I knew where this was gonna go. They both were just such amazing competitors. They expected to win. 2 of the mentally strongest players ever. And let's face it, that's what separates great from good, is the mental part. But I saw that early on, or I'm telling you right now, I would have never took the chance.
And although Macy's primary focus was on older sister Venus, who would turn professional first, Richard Williams saw even greater raw potential in his younger daughter.
Serena was a little prankster, kind of messing around, happy-go-lucky. But he always told me, even at 9, Serena was going to be better. And I couldn't see it, you know? He just said, wait till she matures. Besides the speed, the quickness, okay, you knew she was going to be big and strong and fast. Serena not only checked every box, she added a few more of her own, you know?
After 3 years of intensive training, in 1994, Venus turned professional and entered her first competition, immediately making an impact. The following year, 14-year-old Serena was ready to join her. With Rick Macy turning down the opportunity to train the sisters exclusively, they were now back with their father Richard and without the keen eye of a professional coach. But they could not have chosen a better time to emerge, as women's tennis was going through an evolution.
In the late 90s, you really had the very end of the Steffi Graf era. When I was growing up, Steffi Graf and her 22 Grand Slams, her golden slam, winning all 4 slams in a year and the gold medal, was seen as just an incredible feat. By the late 90s, it was kind of an interesting transition moment, as my friend Mary Carrillo called it. Big babe tennis was kind of the prevalent style. You had Lindsay Davenport, you had Jennifer Capriati, you had people who could just hit massive ground strokes off the ground. And Venus and Serena, because they had practiced largely with each other for so many years, and both of them had an incredibly aggressive ground stroke game, they fit in just right.
While Venus started strongly, when Serena debuted in the 1995 Quebec Bell Challenge, she lost in the qualifying rounds. But the media was already intrigued by these sisters and their bombastic father. Soon, Venus reached the final of the 1997 US Open in her first Grand Slam season, while in the same year Serena was making headlines for her remarkable run at the Ameritech Cup in Chicago. As they faced each other in a Grand Slam for the first time in the 1998 Australian Open and appeared together in the pages of Vogue magazine, it was clear that the Williams sisters were becoming a phenomenon.
Venus steps on the scene. Her little sister wants to come up and be just like her. Her little sister wants to excel as quick as she is. They're each other's biggest cheerleaders, but they could be each other's biggest competitors.
People were fascinated with them in general, particularly since Richard Williams would come to tournaments with his little signs, you know, welcome to the Williams show.
They're both great players, yet it was treated as though they were an entry, Venus and Serena.
They were the Williams sisters. I said it, everyone wrote it. They are very different people, but that was our shorthand, that was our laziness to refer to them that way.
Adding to their image as the Williams sisters, indivisible from each other, was their success playing together as a team. Where Serena failed to make her mark on the singles competitions of 1998, in 1999, she and Venus won their first Grand Slam title for women's doubles at the French Open. But this would also be the year in which Serena made a breakthrough of her own. In September 1999, aged only 17, she fought her way to the final of the US Open. And there, facing world number 1 Martina Hingis, she won her historic first Grand Slam title.
When a young player reaches a final of a major tournament and then wins it, sometimes you look at the draw and say, boy, were they ever lucky. So-and-so pulled out and this person was up all night and on the, no. She mowed through the best players at the time.
1999, Serena Williams shows up at the US Open. She plays Kim Clijsters, Conchita Martinez, Monica Seles, Lindsay Davenport, and Martina Hingis. That is a murderer's row of women. And tennis, you can't help but play the people in front of you. Not all the time does the best player in the draw win the tournament. That said, when Serena Williams won a tournament, you could almost guarantee that she was the best person in the draw. And it started real early in her first slam.
The US Open is a unique beast. It's very loud. She was really embraced by that group. Of course, she's an American playing in an American tournament, but her ethos, New Yorkers would like that. She's a winner. She's I don't care, I'm just gonna go do what I'm gonna do, and she just had an attitude. At the time, that was a big deal, especially for a woman, and especially for a Black woman.
To add to the accolades, the Williams sisters were also crowned champions of the women's doubles at the same tournament. As Serena ended 1999 as world number 4, with Venus 1 place above her, it was becoming clear that their powerful, aggressive style might make a seismic impact on the sport itself. Serena's US Open win was just the first major step toward that.
It was significant in that now there is no longer talk. They've won a title, and they were so young that you just knew more was coming.
Serena was a US Open champion, Venus was a US Open finalist, and people could sense that tennis was changing.
They changed the game with that style, but more importantly, they bought in. They wanted to attack you. They wanted to hurt you. They wanted to hit it hard. But the wild card, the wildest of all the cards, there's no fear. They were bulletproof. They weren't going to be afraid to pull the trigger. They had courage on courage. So when the fans are in the stands and when it was time to do it, they weren't afraid.
Off the court, too, Serena and Venus continued to attract attention. Stepping onto the red carpet at premieres, attending award shows, and in September 2000, appearing for the first time in Sports Illustrated, they enthusiastically courted the media. Yet on the professional circuit, they were very different. Withdrawn, focused, and weary of the wider tennis establishment, the sisters were acutely aware of how dissimilar they were from their fellow professionals.
The fascinating thing about the Williams sisters and Richard in terms of embracing the establishment is they never wanted to. They had each other, and that mentality that we are who we are in spite of what you think of us, what you think of me is none of my business kind of attitude is why they were able to survive it.
Richard Williams basically told them, just talk to each other. And Richard came to that conclusion because he saw the way the other players would act in junior tennis. A lot of the players were spoiled, basically. A lot of these young players had a false sense of entitlement because they come from money, they come from means. And Richard felt like to protect Venus and Serena, they just need to rely on each other. So don't sort of go around the locker room getting involved with what the other players are doing. Talk to your sister. Practice with your sister. They play doubles together. They often would play the same tournaments. And that bond, I think, strengthened both of them.
And they needed this strength. Their meteoric rise may have been celebrated outside the tennis world, but within it, they were still not fully embraced. Two black teenagers in an elite, predominantly white sport. When Serena and Venus first appeared on the professional circuit, they were questioned about their vocal, aggressive playing style and the beads they wore in their hair. And Venus, as the first to emerge, faced particular scrutiny.
It was something that Venus was questioned about in sort of an accusatory way. Why are you wearing your hair like that in the first place? As if, black women somehow have to conform to what other women are doing.
When they had the beads, it was kind of old, like most black women weren't wearing beads. That was something that was fashionable in the 70s. So it was odd for not just white people, but even black people looking at, why are they wearing these beads? But it was just something they liked to do.
They were different, and it's understandable because it's something that's unusual, but it took so long to get over that, and no one wanted to say, well, she's black. That was not being discussed. But I think that was the subtext.
But the backlash against the sisters came to a head in early 2001 at the final of a tournament held in the politically conservative city of Indian Wells, California.
Indian Wells is the ugliest incident I've ever seen in tennis.
Indian Wells, wow. This is a money-drenched tournament. It's in a beautiful setting. They call it the US Open of the West. People who attend that have a lot of dough. They're not from Compton. They may not like people from Compton.
Indian Wells and Compton are almost light years apart. So even though the Williams sisters were technically at home in Southern California, Indian Wells was not home.
Both Serena and Venus had progressed impressively through the tournament and were headed for a semi-final showdown. But serious allegations of match fixing against Richard Williams were already spreading before the game began, fueled by Russian player Elena Dementieva. These rumors were then strengthened when Venus withdrew from the match against her sister through injury, handing Serena a walkover to the final.
It came from the players, the gossips that they are. She's faking that because they don't want to play each other. They had played each other so many times in consequential matches, so I don't buy that.
But the accusations had spread into public opinion. On March 17, 2001, Serena Williams stepped out onto the court at Indian Wells to play for the title against Belgian Kim Clijsters, and the indignant crowd immediately made their feelings known.
Here's the American, Serena from Southern California, against the Belgian Kim Clijsters. That entire crowd, predominantly white, more than 99% white, they booed her. When Richard Williams and Venus Williams took their seats at courtside, they booed them.
And there's Father Richard coming down. It's quite amazing. Joe Jury alongside me, Simon Reed. There's Venus. And the crowd, an American crowd, booing an American family. And you have to say that it does smack of a little bit of racism.
There's film of Venus and Richard coming down into the stadium. They weren't without fans and supporters, but it just was so overwhelming.
It was just this kind of culmination of, we don't like them, we're not sure why, we're gonna create a reason. And it's the beads. Okay, they're not wearing beads. Well, they fixed their matches. It was always something that they couldn't put their finger on, when it's like, no, it's right out there. You're just racist. We have walkovers in tennis because people withdraw so often. It's just a part of the game. So I don't know why they've thought, other than racism, that it was okay to boo her like that because her sister withdrew from the tournament.
And as the match began, the crowd's hostility continued.
Every mistake she made, every error was cheered by an American crowd. It was unprecedented in tennis.
The vitriol to Serena was also hurtful to Kim Clijsters. She seemed confused, her opponent, as to what's going on. Why are they booing this person? I'm Belgian. They were both teenagers. It was an ugly situation. I think they both handled it beautifully, and they remained friends. It was the crowd, the grown-ups, who were acting ridiculous.
And although Serena would triumph over this homegrown adversity and ultimately win the match, the ordeal made a significant impact on the teenager.
She was gracious, she was strong, she didn't let the crowd see how much they had hurt her. But Serena has since said, on the drive away from Indian Wells, she was crying in the car. It hurt her that much, but she didn't let the crowd see it.
In the aftermath of the event, both Serena and Venus would boycott the tournament for over a decade. Yet beyond its impact on the sisters, the Indian Wells debacle would prove a turning point, a watershed moment in which the tennis world was forced to confront its own innate prejudices. From its very inception in late 18th century Britain, the sport had been characterized by its exclusivity, a pastime for the privileged.
Tennis has had so many different eras. You know, it was obviously evolved as sort of a lawn game for rich elitists in their English gardens. And this is dating back about 100 years. You could buy a set and set up your own court in your backyard and, you know, really just have a sort of leisure game between gin and tonics. Tennis, to me, started getting really interesting in the 20s. This is when you actually had your first couple of female superstars. This is Gussie Moran, this is Susan Longland, women who kind of transcended the sport and kind of forced their way in alongside your Renee Lacostes and other sort of legends. Tennis became this, certainly a little bit blue blood, but a place for female success, which if you look at other sports was sort of groundbreaking.
Although it was pioneering in its embrace of women players, this was still bound up in privilege, the female athletes wealthy members of the same social class as the men. And as the game spread to Europe and then to America, it remained an elite country club sport, with no access for either the working classes or for people of color. This led African Americans to form their own sports organization, the American Tennis Association. And by the 1920s, it began to host its own tournaments.
Tennis was a deeply segregated sport when the ATA was formed, and that's one reason it existed, because similar to Negro League Baseball, there were outstanding black baseball players who were not given a chance to play Major League Baseball. The same problem existed in tennis. And the ATA had some wonderful players who unfortunately never got a chance to play major tennis. Ora Washington was one. She won 8 ATA singles championships and combined with various partners to win 12 doubles championships. She could well have become one of the all-time great tennis players, and maybe she was, but she is not known as such. She's been largely forgotten by history because she didn't get a chance to play.
And it was not until the 1950s that a black player was finally given the opportunity to compete in the major tennis tournaments. Althea Gibson, who had honed her talents on the streets of Harlem, became the leading female player in the ATA, dominating the field and winning 10 straight singles titles. But despite her towering reputation, she was still unable to compete in the United States National Championship, solely because of her skin color. It would take the intervention of a former world #1 to finally tackle the racial divide.
A prominent white player named Alice Marble heard about Althea, had not yet met her, but the name was going around tennis circles. Here's this black American woman who is very good, but is not being given a chance to play. Alice broke the ice by writing a column in what was then a influential publication, American Lawn Tennis Magazine. And she put the tennis establishment to shame. How can we say tennis is the sport for ladies and gentlemen if we're not giving this young black woman a chance to play? Football, baseball, basketball were all desegregated. Boxing had black champions like Joe Louis and Jack Johnson. So how could tennis call itself the sport for ladies and gentlemen if we're denying Althea Gibson a chance to prove what she can do against the best tennis players in the world?
The tennis world was convinced by Marble's stinging criticisms, and Althea Gibson's subsequent entrance into the major tennis tournaments finally broke through this segregation. She would become the first black player to win Grand Slams both at home and abroad, and a role model for future generations, including Serena Williams.
She won the U.S. Nationals twice, 1957 and 1958. Won Wimbledon twice, 1957 and 1958. Won the French Nationals in 1956. And because Wimbledon is the premier tournament, when she won her first Wimbledon title in 1957, Queen Elizabeth presented her with the Venus Rosewater dish, the golden plate that the champion receives. And when she came back to New York, she was honored with a ticker tape parade. Althea got the kind of celebration that astronauts returning from the moon would get, or the New York Yankees winning the World Series, or the New York Giants winning the Super Bowl. This was for a Black American woman who broke the color barrier in her sport and was the first Black major champion.
Yet despite this progressive leap forward, Gibson's success did not prove to be a catalyst for long-term change in the tennis world. Although Black stars would break through in the following 3 decades, including the American Arthur Ashe and Frenchman Yannick Noah, by the 1990s, just before the Williams sisters arrived on the scene, the sport remained a predominantly white affair.
If you want to look at that period of time in the 90s, one hand, you can name the Black players. Look at Zina Garrison, a Wimbledon finalist. She could barely get sponsorship, could not scrape up anybody who wants to pay her a dime, and look how good she was.
When Zina Garrison reached the Wimbledon final in 1990, the first Black woman to reach a Wimbledon final since Althea Gibson in 1958, Zina was the only player in the top 10 in women's tennis who did not have a clothing endorsement deal. Zina ended up playing against Martina Navratilova in the 1990 final, wearing clothes that Martina gave her.
After so many years of Black players being underrepresented and underappreciated, when the Williams sisters arrived shortly afterwards, they brought the sport to a tipping point. The Indian Wells debacle was damning proof to many that the deep-rooted prejudices of the conservative tennis world desperately needed to adapt to the modern age. And Serena and her sister Venus would ultimately force that change to occur.
The appearance of Venus and Serena Williams on the scene with their braids, their unapologetic style of play, their family, it was hard to see how anything other than what happened. As much as, sort of it would pain me to say that. Like, we had phenomenally successful players of color preceding the appearance of the Williams sisters. But really, nobody who took up as much space as the Williams family. And I think everything that made them a little bit anathema to the conservative power structures in tennis, the fact that they were loud, the fact that they were unapologetic, the fact that they played loud, flashy tennis and sort of assumed an amount of space, made them incredible tennis players. And so for me, it's been very interesting to kind of see, not only at the time, the way the tennis world reluctantly, but then inevitably made space for Serena Williams in particular.
And if the tennis establishment proved reluctant in accepting these rising stars, the wider public was only too happy to embrace them. Tennis viewership had been on the decline since its heyday in the 1970s, with characters like John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors replaced by more disciplined athletes like Pete Sampras and Steffi Graf, whose dispassionate, clinical playing styles offered little on-court personality. The Williams sisters were a breath of fresh air, and when they faced each other in the final of the 2001 US Open, audience numbers went through the roof.
Tennis should thank its lucky stars that those two came along. Absolutely. 22 million people watching the final between the sisters at the US Open. You got to see them play, and wow, it's for real, and it's exciting.
Not only did Venus and Serena bring more eyes, they brought non-tennis fans to the game. So you had people who didn't care about tennis, never watched. They were tuning in to see these sisters. It was unique. They were young, they were hip.
Saturday night, prime time, US Open, 22 million people watching this. It's one thing to have one play in the finals, but you're playing your sister who lives in the same house and you share the same bedroom. It's a whole different dynamic, and that the eyeballs they brought and the fascination and the intrigue and the story.
And there it is. Venus Williams, the U.S. Open champion, over younger sister Serena Williams.
This is what dreams are made of. You cannot make this stuff up.
And while both sisters were playing their part in attracting record viewing figures, Serena's tough, high-voltage playing style and on-court persona were bringing drama back to the sport.
Tennis was being left in the dust. That whole sense of fair play, congratulations, you know, it's not contemporary, it's not interesting. You want to see people bleed. You want to see their struggles. You know the backstory, and I know that sounds sort of artificial, but that's what is interesting to people. Serena screams when she wins, and you know she gets upset. It's just her understanding of the sport as an entertainment medium.
Serena was now firmly in the spotlight. Between 1999 and 2001, she had rocketed up the rankings to cement herself as a top 10 player. And after years of high expectations, 2002 heralded a new era of dominance. Winning 8 of the 13 tournaments she entered, Serena would beat her higher-ranked sister in 3 Grand Slam finals, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open, before defeating her again in the Australian Open in January 2003, becoming the first player since Steffi Graf to go undefeated in Grand Slams in a single season and finishing the year as world #1. Soon, talk of the Williams sisters came to an end.
2002 is really when you get separation between the two of them. It's so hard not to lump them in together just because they're both so excellent, they're both hitting #1s, they're both getting to finals. But for me, 2002 is really when Serena goes solo. It's not close, and she's winning slam after slam after slam, so much that they had a whole new term for her, which is after winning Wimbledon, the French Open, the US Open, and then the next year, Australian Open, they called it the Serena Slam. To me, the fact that she's beating Jennifer Capriati in 2002 in Miami, a fast, humid court, and beating her sister in the French Open, and then beating her sister again at Wimbledon, it cannot be stated. This is so crazy an achievement because of how diverse the field and the surfaces are at this time. She is firing on all cylinders. She's got the peroxide blonde hair, she's got the ponytail, she looks amazing, and she's playing so amazingly and so far ahead of everybody else that it is hard to ever really keep her in the same, in conversation as the Williams sisters. She's now just Serena Williams, or even just Serena.
And it wasn't just her dominance that was separating Serena from both her sister and her contemporaries. As her confidence as a player grew, so too did her confidence to dress in eye-catching outfits. And both on and off court, she began to experiment with bold new styles and further break away from tennis traditions.
In the early 2000s, Serena was sponsored by Puma. They put her in the Cameroon colors, and she wore a jumper at the French Open with green shorts and yellow trim with the high socks. It's the greatest look that's ever been served.
Serena has never been afraid to make a fashion statement on court. That's one of the things I admire about her. She will come up with unique outfits that nobody else would even dare to wear.
But in a sport known for etiquette and reserve, one outfit in particular drew heavy criticism. The black faux leather catsuit, which she debuted at the US Open in 2002, clearly didn't hinder her path to victory in that competition. But where some press reports applauded her courage and style, others used it as an opportunity to deride Serena herself.
One fashion critic from the Washington Post called her catsuit trashy. You know, there were people likening her to looking like a streetwalker. It was unique for tennis. It was what Serena wanted to wear. It was not trashy. It was just different.
This happens a lot beyond Serena Williams when Black women decide to present themselves in form-fitting clothes, tight clothes. It's automatically, oh, she's trying to be sexual. She's trying to show off her body. And at the end of the day, she's just wearing an athletic outfit that she can move freely in. Now, was there backlash? Absolutely. It's form-fitting. Now you see her muscles and where she's toned, you see her physique. You know, that can be intimidating for a lot of people, honestly. But I mean, if I looked like that, I would be in my skin-tight cat suit as well. And I love it.
And Serena wasn't content just to push boundaries within the world of tennis. Having enrolled at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, Florida to study fashion back in 2000, her interest in this industry was soon to play a central role in her off-court career. And in April 2003, she appeared in her first solo Vogue shoot, confidently celebrating her physique within a fashion world still obsessed by a very different beauty standard.
The fashion industry always has been, always will be dominated by size 0 models. But what was unique was not only was Serena more muscular, but it was you're able to see women as strong and feminine.
Serena's body is obviously perfect for what she's doing, but it is not the slender, white vision of female beauty. And it's yet another norm that she pushed through, and instead of kind of tiptoeing, she just said, ta-da.
Her appearance in Vogue came just at the point that the cultural landscape itself was going through a transformation. While Serena had distinguished herself from Venus in the public's consciousness and was stepping out on her own, Destiny's Child singer Beyonce Knowles was also going solo and quickly emerging as one of the biggest stars in the world. Strong Black women, previously so overlooked by the gatekeepers of the mainstream media, were suddenly in the driving seat.
It's really cool to see this new age of accepting, you know, Black women as the star of the show, Black women being spotlighted. Having curvy bodies, full body women like Beyonce, like Serena Williams, who are authentic in themselves, were always around. But now we're starting to, as the media, as the public, starting to embrace that. And there is some liberation in that. I think we have a long way to go, but it's cool to see, like, okay, I'm Black, my family's Black, I see these types of women all the time, but now I'm seeing it in mainstream media. Now I'm seeing it on magazine covers. Now I'm seeing it in commercials.
In December 2003, Serena signed a $40 million deal with Nike. At the time, the largest endorsement contract ever offered to a female athlete. And this would propel her into the spotlight even further. Attending red carpet premieres, high-profile events, and invited to New York's prestigious Met Gala in 2004, Serena was no longer a sports star, but had now become an international celebrity. And where the tennis community had initially shunned her, the entertainment world welcomed her with open arms.
The tennis world, you have this predominantly white sport, and you have this colorful world of entertainment and celebrity and culture. So I think naturally she was, you know, embraced and accepted in that diverse space, like a lot of people are, like a lot of Black athletes are.
Serena felt more at home with celebrity only because celebrities loved Serena. I mean, she is one of the few athletes who have celebrity groupies. Celebrities embraced Serena because they were fangirling on her and they wanted to meet her. So that was a place where on the tennis world, she had a lot of adversaries. In the world of entertainment, they embraced her, loved her. So she had become like her own celebrity outside of sports, and people knew her name everywhere.
But just as she had been elevated to the top tier of popular culture, the tide turned, and Serena was hit by a number of personal and professional crises. In September 2003, her oldest half-sister and personal assistant, Yatunda Price, was shot and killed in Compton. At the same time, her career began to be plagued by significant injuries. In 2004, she won only 2 minor titles, and despite winning the Australian Open in 2005, afterwards her form and her fitness deteriorated once again. While her career away from the court seemed healthy, with acting roles in popular shows Law and Order and ER, her absence from the professional tour saw her ranking slip ever downwards. At the end of 2006, she was ranked number 96 in the world, and many tennis insiders felt she had become too preoccupied with her life outside of sport.
Now, are we gonna see you on the big screen?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, very soon, very soon.
How's the fashion line going?
Very good. I'm really excited about everything.
She was dabbling in acting, fashion design. She was pulling herself in many different directions and not focusing on tennis as much as she should have. Success came so quickly, I think she believed, okay, I've conquered the tennis world, what else can I do?
Emotionally, she was struggling to deal with her sister's death. And it wasn't just her sister's death, because her sister also had 2 kids. And a lot of people don't realize Venus and Serena went to court, you know, trying to win custody of their niece and nephew. So to be in your 20s and trying to win custody of 2 little kids. And so when you have the emotional stuff along with the injuries, that was a tough time.
But Serena was determined not to lose her crown. Her win at the 2007 Australian Open final provided her with a lifeline, and the following year's victories at the Miami Masters and a 3rd US Open final set her on course for a dramatic comeback. And that was to happen in 2009, when she won in Australia yet again before beating her sister to claim her 3rd Wimbledon title. But rather than return full-time to the WTA Tour, Serena had selected the tournaments in which she would compete, careful to avoid further injury. It proved a hugely successful strategy, and by the end of 2009, she was world number 1 yet again.
Even in being a little bit more detached from the game, she ended up being incredibly impactful, because what she did was start cherry-picking her season. She wouldn't play all the mandatory tournaments. In fact, when she needed to play a mandatory tournament and it wasn't going to coincide with her schedule for whatever reason, she would gladly pay the fine. That actually ended up creating a trend where athletes created their own schedules, kind of had their own swings, and we've seen it basically ever since. It's amazingly vindicating to think about the amount of times Serena was written off, especially as she aged. And I think for me, it proved that this really would only be over when she wanted it to be. And whenever she decided that the game was hers for the taking, she made it happen.
And despite still suffering from intermittent injuries, including a life-threatening pulmonary embolism, and drifting up and down the rankings while in recovery, from 2010, Serena began to compete at the top level once again. Now approaching her 30s, she nevertheless was able to focus on those aspects of her game that helped her to dominate her opponents. And the most powerful of these attributes was her serve, which she had been developing since her youth.
Even before I got involved, her throwing motion, biomechanically, was correct. It was natural. Venus wasn't. She was more disjointed, okay? But Serena, her natural motion was like, whoa. It was like a quarterback just throwing a tight spiral. The motion, and I kept telling her, the toss. It's like you have an egg in your hand, put the egg on the shelf. Egg on the shelf. Fast forward, best serve ever in women's tennis. Her attitude was always think big, go bigger, expect to hit an ace. It wasn't like just get it in like it was in the 80s and early 90s. So the mindset was there, but her serve, Serena's serve, poetry in motion, a knife through butter, but there's an assassin with a racket in her hand just wanting to hit that ball as hard as she could. When it was break point, or when she needed it, it's that Compton street fight that she could go deep inside. The bigger the moment, that's what separates great from good. Bang! She would get that serve in when she needed it.
And alongside her serve, another aspect of her game that Serena used to diminish her opponents was her ability to volley at the net.
Serena has baseline shots that are as good, if not better, than anyone else who's ever played the game, but her net game is elite. Again, not very many people, especially women, emphasize so much net play, and it is easy to forget, but important to remember how many titles she won, usually alongside her sister, but also in mixed doubles. She's an elite doubles player.
And where the media devoted untold column inches in praise of her power and her physical dominance, often less appreciated was her on-court intelligence.
Her strength is her brain, her mindset, and the fact that she has a very strong will. You do not get to where she is and stay there. That's the main thing. You don't stay there unless you have some just monumental determination, self-belief, resilience. She just has a will.
Every single match Serena has ever contended, she expects to win. And for a large part of her career, so did her opponents. And you can't overstate how tough it is to go out against an opponent who's already essentially beaten you, broken your spirit, made you not believe.
You have to beat her, because she's certainly not going to beat herself. That's a big deal.
All of these attributes would come to the fore as Serena strived to regain her winning form in 2010. After her years in the wilderness, she was up against a renewed field of competitors, some of whom she was facing for the first time. Yet up until this point, her injuries had caused her more concern than her opponents.
Serena had really few rivals. You know, at the beginning of her career, her sister proved to be a frequent sparring partner. You know, she had some interesting matches against Steffi Graf or Martina Hingis, but really for her prime, there was almost nobody who could kind of hold a candle to her.
You don't look back at Serena's career and say, oh, she played so-and-so 48 times and it was, you know, 24-24. It's not like that, and it's not like the attenuated rivalry that Martina Navratilova had with Chris Evert, where they brought out the best in each other. I think that there were sharp, pointed moments when people played well against Serena, kind of figured her out, or she may have had something going on, and they won. But I don't think there was someone where she said, man, this is going to be a tough one.
But at the start of her comeback trail in 2007, she had faced an opponent who repeatedly stood in her way. The Belgian Justine Henin had defeated her in the quarterfinals of 3 Grand Slams during that season: the French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open, and proved a major obstacle in Serena's goal to get back to the top.
At her peak, she could take the fight to Serena because she and Serena had very different games. Justine Henin is one of the few people who was sort of bold enough, and she's not big, she's only 5'5", to stand inside the baseline on a Serena Williams serve, just in the effort to take it early and try to dictate the point before Serena would get the chance. So from a tennis perspective, she's kind of, in my mind, the closest that Serena had to a consistent rival.
In 2008, Henin had briefly retired. But in January 2010, with Serena looking to return to form and dominate the field, she faced Henin once again at the final of the Australian Open. It would prove a key match in Serena's resurgence.
Justine Henin was kind of coming back, trying to decide whether she was gonna retire. And she was at the time the only real competition for Serena, consistent competition. To beat her and send her back into retirement was kind of like Serena's like, no, I'm in charge now. I'm here to stay. So I think that was her kind of sending the message to the field that I'm back for good now.
But as Serena moved into the second chapter of her career, there was one other rival on her radar. And Russian player Maria Sharapova was competing with her both on and off the court. Having entered the professional circuit just as Serena's form had started to decline, in 2004, Sharapova had caused an upset when, as the 13th seed, she defeated the defending champion at the Wimbledon final. Although Serena had been gracious in defeat, the tennis world's sudden embrace of Sharapova after the game was a shock.
There were people in the sport hoping someone else would come along to take over for the Williams sisters, and Maria didn't exactly take over. She just beat Serena in a big upset in 2004, and people ran with that. Oh, Maria's the next big thing now. Nike gave Maria Sharapova a more lucrative endorsement deal than the one Serena had because Maria won that match. And I'm sure that got to Serena as well because Serena had done so much more.
Being 17 and upsetting Serena, that puts Sharapova on the map. She's the new darling, and even though she's Russian, you know, she was a darling in the US too. All of the money just started pouring into Sharapova. She'd won one tournament against an injured Serena Williams, but oh, she's better, and she's blonde, and she's tall. So it was this kind of weird transition for Serena during that time.
And during Serena's years of struggle and absence, Sharapova had not only proven one of the best players in the game, but had eclipsed her as the face of women's tennis.
To have a good rivalry, the other person has to be at the top too, you know, and Sharapova was at the top. She was dominating when Serena was out, and then so when Serena came back strong, this is the person she had to beat.
A lot of the years that both Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova were active, Maria Sharapova, despite having a whisper of Serena Williams' tennis resume, especially head-to-head, bested Serena Williams in money endorsements. Canon, Porsche, Evian, the list goes on and on. She was really out-earning Serena by such a large margin that I think it enraged Serena and made her play even better tennis, because an angry Serena Williams tends to be a focused Serena Williams, and that's not who you want to see on the other side of the court.
And in 2012, on the back of winning her 5th Wimbledon singles title, a resurgent Serena faced off against Maria Sharapova once again. The occasion was momentous, the final of the London Olympics, with the victor set to receive a coveted gold medal. And Serena made sure that there was only one winner.
Serena's most dominant performance came against Maria in the 2012 gold medal match in the Olympics. It was held at Wimbledon that year on center court, and Serena smoked Maria 6-love, 6-1.
It was just stunning, that match. Serena was better than her in every aspect of the game. I don't think she's ever played cleaner, more decisive tennis. Serena was just teeing off on her second serve. It was like batting practice.
And there was something about the image of Serena standing highest on the podium as the gold medal winner, and Maria below her as the silver medalist, and the look on Serena's face, like the whole world sees this, and this is the pecking order as it should be.
The following year, 2013, Serena finally made her way back to the very top, becoming the oldest female world #1 at nearly 32 years old. The second chapter of her career would prove even more successful than the first. Yet Serena had also been looking for new impetus and inspiration. And this drew her away from her father, Richard, toward French coach Patrick Mouratoglou.
2013 that's the year I think was Serena's best year. And it was also her first full year after teaming up with the coach Patrick Mouratoglou, because in 2012 at Wimbledon, that's the first time he coached her. That was also the last time Richard Williams was in the players box at a Grand Slam, 2012. He never showed up again in the players box. And it was almost like that transition from Serena's now her own person. She became a lot more strategic in how she approached the matches and about chasing records. Before, I don't think she cared.
And those records were soon within her sights. Serena entered the 2013 season with 16 major singles titles to her name, 2 behind Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova, and 4 behind Steffi Graf, the record holder in the Open era with 22 titles. Back on form and once again dominating the field, Serena won the US and French Opens, and then in 2014, completed a record-equaling 3rd US Open win in a row to draw level with fellow Americans Evert and Navratilova. And with this victory, she also earned the highest single paycheck in the history of tennis for winning the US series of titles within a single calendar year. Where once Serena had been viewed with skepticism by the American tennis establishment, now she was its greatest asset.
For what Serena was being rewarded with in 2014, I think that was a pivotal moment in shifting the tide. Serena and her sister carried the banner for American tennis, and they did it for decades, because still no American man has won a major tennis title since Andy Roddick in 2003. That means an entire generation of tennis fans has not seen any American man hold up a major tennis trophy, but they've seen Serena do it many times. The Williams sisters really didn't change. America changed. After a while, American tennis fans said, we don't have any reason to dislike them. Why don't we root for Serena? Now we were hearing Serena mentioned in the conversation about the GOATs of sports, the greatest of all time. Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, Pele, Wayne Gretzky, Tom Brady. Serena's name was being included, and it was the first time that a great female athlete was getting that kind of respect.
And while Serena was commanding that respect and breaking records in the tennis world, her schedule was not limited to sport. 2 days after winning the US Open, she took to the stage at another New York tradition, New York Fashion Week, debuting her Serena Williams runway collection in front of a star-studded crowd. Where critics had once doubted that she could juggle her on and off-court activities, now Serena was proving that she could excel at both.
2014, you have this runway collection by Serena Williams. Lots of bold colors, lots of leopard prints, and blazers in leather. It was fun, it was different, it was unique. This era of, and it's still going on today, of celebrity athletes building their brand is something that Serena kind of fell into so well.
And having ended 2014 on a high, in 2015, Serena's winning streak continued. With victories at both the Australian Open and the French Open, in July she traveled to Wimbledon. Here the tennis world was buzzing once again, as the prospect of a victory in the singles competition would see her complete a second historic Serena Slam.
It is a huge incentive for me. I did it before in Australia, which was pretty cool, so I've held all 4 in a row. So I keep thinking about that, so if it doesn't happen, you've already done it, so don't be disappointed in yourself. But at the same time, I'm here to win Wimbledon. I'm not here to win the Serena Slam. I'm not here to focus on winning the Grand Slam. I'm just here to win Wimbledon or do the best I can at Wimbledon and see what happens after that. That's all I can do.
And Serena's best proved enough to secure her a victory in the final. With this win, she not only achieved her second Serena Slam, but she also became the oldest female in the Open era to win a major singles title. And she was now only 1 behind Steffi Graf's record of 22 Grand Slams.
The comeback was complete. She had lost her way for a few years. She was determined to get it back, and she got her groove back.
It just shows how she loves to play. She loves to kick butt and take names. This is a competitor. It wasn't about the money. I mean, she had all the money. She had all the fame and fortune. It was about she loved to compete.
To me, this is like legacy building stuff. All rivals have pretty much fallen out of contention. She's winning as much as she can, as much as she wants to. You start looking at the Steffi Graf record. Oh wow, Steffi Graf was so dominant, she got 22 slams, but nobody will ever get that. And then all of a sudden in the mid-teens, it just becomes another goal or record that Serena can get into her sights. And you start thinking, oh, she's going to end up with more than Steffi Graf, isn't she?
Yet there would be obstacles in her path. A new generation of players were emerging who would offer fresh challenges. And in 2016, Serena was defeated in the finals of both the Australian Open and the French Open, the first time she had suffered back-to-back losses in Grand Slam finals. Once again, this brought the drama to Wimbledon in July 2016, where she was reigning champion and the #1 seed. Here, she progressed to the final, where she faced Angelique Kerber, a German player very much in form.
She was playing Kerber, who had just beat her at the Australian Open, and Kerber was probably one of her better competitors at the time. And Serena, sometimes when she's trying to reach a milestone, she gets tight, and she would, get nervous and knowing time is running out. That was a great match. Kerber did not cower. Serena had to beat her.
2 sets to 1.
14 years after that first victory here, Grand Slam number 22. Irresistible, majestic. And the judgment of history will surely be that she was in a class of her own.
I think it was significant because it's like, now you're at 22, that's off my back. I'm trying to tie Graf, and it's like, now I'm in that GOAT discussion. They would put Margaret Court up there, but everybody knew Graf was really the target. So it's like, now I can best Graf. That was a big deal.
Having equaled Graf's Open-era record, some tennis insiders did start to raise the 24 Grand Slam wins of Australian champion Margaret Court, who had dominated the sport in the 1960s. Yet Court had played before the Open era, when tennis tournaments were amateur-only events, and many of her wins were at the Australian Open itself, which failed to attract the world's top players as it was so expensive to travel to. Yet ironically, it was at the Australian Open in 2017 that Serena finally passed Steffi Graf's Grand Slam record. The final itself was historic. When both of the Williams sisters stepped onto center court at the Rod Lava Arena to do battle, it was their first meeting at a Grand Slam final since 2009 and their first in Australia since 2003. Venus, now 36, was the oldest woman finalist at the Australian Open ever, and the contest took their story full circle. 20 years after they had first emerged, the Williams sisters were still competing at the top level of their sport. Serena's eventual victory saw her crowned world #1 yet again. And unbeknownst to the spectators, she had achieved this win while 8 weeks pregnant.
The significance of passing Graf, it's like now there's no question. The whole point of Margaret Court didn't become a thing until after Serena passed Graf. I'm like, nobody really thinks that she's the greatest. I think that was just kind of this barrier that, people put in place to put another hurdle over Serena, but Graf was really the standard to beat. And I think that winning that, I felt like Serena, not only was she pregnant, but felt like, hey, I can leave the game now. I got 23. That's the one. Not that she didn't want to get Margaret Court, but I think that 23, that's the one she wanted. It was about passing Graf.
In April 2017, Serena publicly announced her pregnancy with her partner, the entrepreneur Alexis Ohanian. Stepping back from the limelight and resting at her home in West Palm Beach, Florida, for the rest of the year, she disappeared from the professional circuit. Following a difficult labor that saw Serena suffer another life-threatening pulmonary embolism, on September 1st, the couple's daughter, Alexis Olympia, was born. And despite being hospitalized for 6 weeks after the birth, by the end of the year, Serena was back in training once again. And in 2018, she returned to competitive tennis.
You can't pin Serena down. There's no narrative that stays static with her. So, African American, oh, how different. She plays differently. She's really tough and strong. Look what she's wearing. And now She's a mom, she's married, she has a little kid, and she almost died during childbirth. It's yet another part of her story. And she's let people in under her own terms, and she has a kind of integrity, and I think it's really, really compelling.
Again, if you see her, you can be her. And it's like, yeah, I can be a mother and I can have a career. I can be a mother and I can still be a role model. I can be a mother and I can still excel and be the best at whatever I'm doing in my career or otherwise. Her becoming a mother, her having her daughter, just made her that much more relatable, that much more inspirational.
Serena was back in the spotlight, with motherhood boosting her profile even further. In May 2018, she and her husband Alexis were prominent guests at her friend Meghan Markle's wedding to Prince Harry. And the following year, she was a co-host at the Met Gala, the fashion world's most prestigious annual event. And while the celebrity world enthusiastically embraced her return, the tennis world was even keener to see her back in the draw. And while she withdrew from the 2018 French Open due to injury, in July, she made her highly anticipated return to Wimbledon. Only 10 months after she had given birth, in a remarkable series of matches, Serena had soon made her way to the final.
When Serena came back, I think her being away from the game made people realize how much they missed her. To me, it was kind of like foreshadowing what that game would be like without her. People were starting to appreciate how much excitement having her in the draw, how much people wanted to see her play, that her game was unique. It wasn't just about power, that she brought something different to the game. There's like a buzz around the place when Serena's in the field.
Yet Serena was unable to claim victory in the final against old sparring partner Angelique Kerber. And at the 2018 US Open, she was also the runner-up. The field had grown since her last Grand Slam wins, and new stars were rising who were presenting fresh challenges. Across the next 4 years, she would reach 2 more major finals, but another Grand Slam victory proved elusive. She may have been the greatest player of the modern era, but now her remarkable reign had come to a natural end.
By coming back now as a mother, trying to win a major title and tie a coveted record. Margaret Court's 24 major titles, Serena has 23, and she gamely went out there to try to achieve that, made 2 US Open finals, 2 Wimbledon finals. Unfortunately, she did not win them, but in a strange way, she became more and more popular as she tried to do that, because it would have been so easy for her to retire after the 2017 Australian Open. And rather than say, oh, Serena failed because she lost those 4 finals, Serena made those 4 finals.
To be clear, after she had Olympia, her daughter, she made plenty of Grand Slam finals. She had great tournaments. She was able to compete. She wasn't quite able to get over the hump. And I think part of this is probably external pressure, but in the end, it doesn't matter so much, because winning even more tennis matches or even more titles wouldn't have changed the amount of greatness we associate with her, the amount of change both within the game but also sort of societally she has left us with. And I think the fact that we got to see her really struggle and ultimately conquer her vulnerability, I think the fact that we got to see her as a working parent, just this idea that she brought herself to the moment and therefore changed the moment, is kind of the greatest possible impact that she could have had.
And on September 2nd, 2022, at the US Open, Serena Williams played her final competitive match and bid an emotional farewell to a sport that she had dominated for 2 decades. Although her career as a fashion entrepreneur and celebrity would endure, her departure would bring to an end perhaps the most astonishing tennis journey of all time, and leave the game without its most famous face. Yet her impact on the sport would prove lasting. The greatest female player of all time began as an outsider, and through her success, she opened the doors for new generations to follow her.
Most of the international tennis associations for different countries have tried to reach into communities where tennis isn't played. You go into that community and you say, hey kids, let's be a tennis player. They look around at the sport and they don't see anyone that looks like them. So that's the value of diversity. That's the value of having someone like Serena. I see her now. I see myself. I am reflected. So therefore, okay, I can do that. It's immeasurable, and that is a legacy. And these are big, kind of overblown things. It's true.
It's not even a conversation. When she announced her retirement in Toronto, there were 7 Black women in the main draw, and that was not news. It's just now a constant on the tour. You see that many in the main draw, more Black women in the main draw of the US Open than in the Major League Baseball World Series.
Serena did more to change women's tennis than anyone else, and the young players who are emerging today are part of that legacy, because many of them will tell you they're only playing tennis because they saw Serena Williams. Coco Gauff has said, it was easy for me to pursue a tennis career, to tell my parents I want to be a tennis player because the #1 player in the world looked like me. In the case of Naomi Osaka, she was given a class assignment to write about the person you admired most. And she wrote about Serena. And there's Taylor Townsend and Sloane Stephens and Madison Keys and Alicia Parks, who won her first professional title in 2023. Alicia Parks was actually a body double for Serena in a Gatorade commercial. She's that iconic that a generation later, we're seeing champions who wouldn't be in tennis, who would not have tennis on their radar if not for Serena.